Hi everyone, this is my topology and I'm going to show you how I model a kettlebell. So I'm starting out and I'm using a cube. What you're going to see is what I did was first I added a blend material just to see my specular reflections, just to see if there's any surface imperfections on my model. And then I smoothed my cube a couple of times just to get nice even topology. And then I'm using the deformer called Sculpt. And what that does is it takes any surface and it pushes it out so that it mirrors a sphere. And because I used a cube sphere, which gives me better topology, it's just going to work all around just way better, and it's going to have equalized topology. And topology is just evenly spaced subdivisions on your model. So the next thing that I am doing is I'm trying to make this handle. And what you saw was I opened up my modeling toolkit and I made sure that surface transform was turned on. This is just so that when I do my extrusion, it doesn't mess up the surface. It keeps everything according to the surface, so that there is no warbling or no surface imperfections. So I did that, and I'm just smoothing out the sides, just pushing them in, because if you have sides that's not pushed in like this, it's gonna look a little bit weird on your model, and that's why I also put the blend material, because it shows anything that's going weird with the model. And I didn't mention it, but this is not gonna be a step-by-step every button that I press, type of tutorial. It's just talking about my overall general process. Besides the smoothing of my cube and the sculpt deformer, pretty much everything else is just, I'm just moving verts and I'm moving polygons around, making sure that when I smooth or go into smooth preview by clicking 3, which you see I do quite often, everything looks fine. It matches the reference, and I'm modeling directly on reference. And I guess another way I'm using, there's multiple ways you can add in edge loops. I happen to use multi-cut because it's really handy and it's really easy to add in adding cuts to your model. Sometimes I need it, sometimes you don't. Like I said, you can use multiple ways to add in subdivisions or cuts to your model, but I use multi-cut. And right here I'm just checking again when I added my subdivisions to my model. I'm just checking to see if it messed around with the surface and it caused any warbling or artifacts or surface imperfections. Again, I'm gonna keep saying it because it's important when you are working on especially curved surface. If you don't have a good topology or good edge flow for your curved surfaces, everything is just gonna look just a little bit weird. Now, I could have added them in there because, as you see from the reference, there's a lot of bumps and unevenness to this kettlebell. But I figured I can add that in with texturing anyway, so I just wanted to make sure I had a clean surface. And what you see here is I used, instead of taking my model and then extruding it constantly, what I did was I used curve. I created a CV curve and I just traced the outline, and then I took a part of my edge flow, the handle part, and I just extruded it along the curve. and this just makes things go way faster than extruding and then flipping faces and rotating and doing all that stuff. So sometimes I do that, and there's no right or wrong way. I just happen to use it this time. And like I said before, I'm just taking verts and I'm moving them around, pushing around polygons, being a polygon pusher. And this is pretty much my workflow, really. Sometimes I'm a little bit too like nitpicky, and I go around and I slow down my own process by trying to, trying to make sure like every vert is in the right area. Ideally you're supposed to work in passes, but when I'm in the flow, and maybe anyone else who is watching this and you're also modeling or trying to get into modeling, or when you do anything really, when you get into a flow of anything, you just do what's normal. There's tons of ways in which you can make like 3D art or anything that you want. No one way is correct, and no one way is like wrong. Well, there is, wrong ways to model, like having like bad topology or things called like n-gons, if you don't know about those. Sometimes they can work, well, especially if you're doing like really like hardcore hard surface modeling. But for this, this is just pretty straightforward. And another feature of multi-cut is you can fix topology with this. So what I just did there, I deleted half of the model because it'd just be easier for me to work, and I'm just fixing my edge flow here and drawing along the surface of my model. Yeah, multi-cut is like super handy for that too, because like you can see like, okay, I'm trying to push this edge flow along, but then I thought, okay, maybe I don't need to do that, and that's going to take time. And the more you model, you don't want to like constantly look at the same thing over and over again, or get too hampered by like topology and stuff like that. And then you can just take the fun out of whatever you're modeling, especially if you're looking at something constantly over and over and over again. Then it just won't be fun. So yeah, when you can save time using any type of method, and the end result looks good, just do it. And that's what I just did there. Just made sure that I cut my model in half to do it. I could have used like mirror and like mirrored my model piece in my geometry, but yeah, I just cut it in half because this prop is pretty much, it's really simple. And I figured once I have like one part of it done, I could just like duplicate it and then mirror across the different axes and everything. So yeah. Which you see I do it right now. Yeah, so I just did that, making sure that my merge happens the way I want it to. And then once I was happy with how everything looked, I think what I did was, yeah, I pushed around some more verts just to match the reference more. And sometimes when you mirror and you're working with, like you're modeling directly on a reference or with a reference directly, sometimes the other mirrored part of the surface, it's not going to match. But as long as one side matches, like how I'm only focusing on the left side here, that's the only thing that really matters. I don't know why it does that, but I don't know, it just does it for some reason. But yeah, no need to worry about that, because if you try to like fix and push everything in, it's just going to take longer, and maybe that's the thing that you're looking for, but for me it wasn't. So I just hid that curve because maybe I wanted to come back later and change it. Maybe I didn't, but it's better to just hide it instead. And you see I just turned off symmetry for this, because if you try to like scale anything with symmetry turned on, it can get a little bit weird. So I made sure I turned it off. And you can see that once I turned it off and then I scaled that bottom face to make the bottom, like the topology got a little bit weird and uneven. It's not totally noticeable right now, but right here. So this is an easy fix. Turn back on symmetry just to select the faces easier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use circularize. Yeah. and as soon as I circularize, um, I get the type of like edge flow, and I get the type of topology, and just the general way the surface should look. And I like the way it looked. Then I'm just adding some holding edges because I'm gonna smooth this later on. And you can see there's a little bit of like weird surfacing because I changed the topology from the bottom, and then now I'm gonna have to work my way up. And so I'm just using an edge flow, getting a little bit of OCD right there. But yeah, and I'm making sure that even though it's in smooth preview, my like the overall surface of the shape of this prop it's set in stone pretty much. And when I model, you never want to like model something in like smooth preview because it can get a little bit weird once you go back to just regular like poly mode. But like once you blocked in everything, it's fine. And yeah, and so once I made sure that everything was to my liking, I smooth previewed, and then I actually smoothed. But then I realized, okay, maybe the surface needs to be a little bit more pinched according to my reference. But then, okay, I said, maybe not, and maybe smooth that out a little bit more. And again, you can see what's happening. That highlight, which is why I added the blend material, that highlight shows exactly what's going on. And it's not matching the reference. There's a smooth transition according to that reference. And the bevels that I added isn't making it so smooth. But this is more or less like what I wanted and how the reference is. So yeah, now I'm just doing the same thing, pushing around polys, pushing around verts, making sure that everything as closely like matches the reference as possible. Yeah. And again, I smoothed it, made sure I kept what I wanted. I didn't go too high because it didn't need to be too high. And what I did was, once I was done with all my modeling, I just freeze transformed, deleted history, and now I'm going to get into the UVs. First thing I do is delete my UVs. I'm adding a planar map, and then I go up to the UV editor. I go up to UVs, and I use right here you can see the 3D cut and sew tool, and I'm just marking where there is like actual seams into the model. It's just like when you look at your clothes have like seam lines, like where the sleeves are, where things connect, right? And when you're UVing something for texturing, you just want to cut along where those seams are. And I still have symmetry turned on so that things just move faster, right? Yeah. And again, this is a perfect example of why I use this, like a smooth cube for my topology for a sphere, because it's giving me all quads and it's easier to like mark out the seams. So now what I'm doing here is I'm unwrapping and I'm laying out. But I used 4K resolution, like unwrap, and then I also used like multiple like packing iterations. And when you do it in Maya, I know there's like different like software that you can use to go and unwrap. I know Blender has like a really excellent like unwrapping, just in general. But you know, I'm using Maya. Maya's what I learned. But anyway, when you use the different packing iterations, the higher that number, the slower it's gonna take. Yeah, it didn't show on the video. And if you wanted to see, I can show you my settings. But yeah, so that's what I did. I put it to 6, and then it was too long packing iterations. And then what you're gonna see, like after I got like the result that I wanted from my packing, which they call like layout, in this tool, all I'm doing is turning off symmetry, and then I am just rotating around to make sure that all my UV shells fill out um, this 4K square that I have, or like this, or this base UV square. Because any like wasted space, it's not good. Like texturing, like workflows. I know some people like they work in like VFX or something like that, and they use um, this thing called UDIMs. And UDIMs, it doesn't necessarily matter about how much space because everything is getting like every minor detail is getting like its own like space within the UV grid. But I'm just using like a game workflow or something like that just to keep it basic. So yeah, and now I'm just moving everything around like I said again. It's like a puzzle, it's like Tetris or something like that. So I'm just coming in, um, moving things around. Maybe I didn't like the pattern here, and I figured, okay, there could be a better pattern that I can use to fix everything. And so I'm just using different things, different tools from the UV toolkit, making sure everything is like aligned properly, fitting within the grid. It's closely packed, it's tied together. And then I'm just scaling everything up. Then another handy thing is if you go into view and you go to UV statistics, you can see how much at the bottom, um, like at the bottom of the UI right there in the UV editor, you can see how much is used. I try to get it as close to like 70% or 75% as possible. Um, just so you know that like, just so I know that I'm not like being wasteful with my space. So when I'm texturing, everything is being utilized. And again, this is where I was talking about like I was making sure that you know I you know that there's a better pattern that I can get, making sure everything is pushed as closely together as possible. So then once everything is packed towards the center, once I scale everything up, you know, I'm getting more space in general, which I do right now. And then I reached my 17% mark, um, and I called it good. And so now I'm just rotating around, renaming my materials and when I export to my texturing software of choice, which is Substance Painter. Um, everything is just more organized. So I ended up with a nice final prompt. And then I'm just for organization's sake, because I usually come back to my scene files, I just renamed um, like my asset here. I renamed it in the outliner, making sure that history is deleted. And I think the last thing I do is center pivot. Like if I wanted to put this in Unreal Engine to render or something, making sure that the pivot's at the bottom. Okay, so we are now in Substance Painter and we are going to texture our kettlebell. Well, actually, I had already textured this before I recorded, so I just thought that I would give you all my my thoughts and my process breakdown for this one. On like what I chose to do, how I chose to do everything, and why I textured this the way that I did. So the first thing that you'll do when you get into Substance Painter is you usually will come on here into this menu. You would hit New, and then you can choose from all these different templates if you are unfamiliar with Substance Painter. I pretty much keep it at the default, and then like when I'm ready to export my textures to whatever engine that I'm going to be using for rendering or wherever my assets are going to end up being, then I worry about that on export. I have Blender, let's see, Unreal, Unity, V-Ray, everything else. PBR metallic roughness can be for Arnold and Maya as well, and Max too. But yeah, you set your document resolution. You can keep it low, like when you come in here. That's what I usually do. I make sure everything looks good at a lower resolution before I bump it up to like 2K or 4K or higher. But yeah, um, and everything else I just keep it the same. Like I keep it default. I don't change anything. So I'm not gonna do this again because I already have the kettlebell open. Alright, the next thing, I usually go to my texture set settings and I bake all my maps first. Um, Substance Painter is procedural based, like texturing. So you need your maps, like your texture ID maps, we call them, in order to make sure that any of these textures that you see here, like work like perfectly in the way they're meant to work when you start texturing. So yeah, so you would go down here to bake mesh maps. This is how it would look, the baker. Yeah, I know you'll probably watch other videos or heard about like different like texture map bakers. Um, there's definitely some out there. I just personally use Substance Painter um, because it's pretty good. It's pretty robust. They made it better. The earlier versions could have been better, so to speak. But yeah, these current iterations are pretty good. Um, so yeah, output size, like I said, keep it 1024, keep it low. Um, I don't have a high poly, so I don't need to use low poly as high poly or anything like that. My mesh is as it is, and so I just baked with that. I made sure I keep everything basic. You can always come around and change the anti-aliasing to get better results. Let's see. What else? For your ambient occlusion, you can change the secondary rays and occlusion distance if you want some different results, like more sharper shadows. But yeah, for the most part, though, if you're going through the workflow that I'm showing with this kettlebell, you can just bake with default settings. Again, I'm already baked, so I'm not going to go bake. And so let's get into my process. Alright, so the first thing that I did, like I said, I baked my textures. And then, since my kettlebell is supposed to be iron, I could have came in and I could, let's see, started just completely blank, really, and made an iron from scratch. And I can show you like how that would look. So let's say I turned off all my layers, by the way, and you can see I'm gonna start turning them on as I go through. But let's say I wanted this to be iron, right? The only thing that I'm worrying about is if this is metal. And just by turning the slider, metallic materials are going to be from like 0 to 1. But yeah, and then I would just go through and like add like, bumps and scratches and stuff like that. But the kettlebell is painted kettlebell. So yeah, you can work your way up, but then there's also these smart materials that you can use. I use iron. Let me see if I put it in. The iron that I used was iron old, as you can see right here. So I'm going to delete this and start taking you through now. So yeah, the first thing I did was apply this iron old. You can see how this looks. Pretty good, but like I said, my kettlebell is a painted kettlebell. So the next thing I did was I added some bumps to it according to my reference. And you can see how this is looking. Pretty used. And this smart material, the iron old, I didn't do anything to it. It just came right out the bag, just pretty good. So yeah, for my bumps though, I did do some things. I just turned on my height channel. I gave it a little bit of height. And then I found the sails in this grayscale, and you can see it if I go through my channels, my normal channels. You can see it really well. So if I turn it off, oh wait, it's height. There we go. So yeah, if I turn it off, you can see like how it is influencing my surface. Turn it on, and you can see. Another thing that I'll highlight is always do triplanar if you can. It gets rid of the seams really, really well. Without triplanar, I'll show you how it looks. Let's see, planar projection, and you can see like all the stuff is going on that won't look well. Maybe if that's what you are going for, but for the most part, it doesn't look pretty good. So yeah, I'm gonna go to triplanar, and yeah. The next thing is I wanted to add like, okay, this is a weight, right? A kettlebell. So it's gonna have like a weight. So what you want to do is, or what I did was, I added the weight sign. So if I turn this on, this is 12 kgs, which is something like 25 pounds. Yeah. And the way I did that was, again, I went to my height, normal channel. I decreased it a lot, like all the way down to -1, so that it looks like it's actually inside of the surface. I added a black mask, which you can do by right-clicking. Added a black mask, and this is how you add like generators, filters, anchor points, stuff like that. And what I did was I added a font, and you can go in here. Let me click off of that. If you type in font, if you select any one of these, you could place your font down, and then you can type in your own text. Yeah, I added a bevel to it, and you can see how it looked without the bevel. It's like, oh, okay, it looks like it was, stamped in there, but when you add the bevel filter, it gives it like a little bit more realness to it. And then I sharpened just to make everything pop. I'm not sure if you'll be able to notice like the change, but adding the sharpness really makes like your work, your texture work, filter work, or whatever you do, makes it stand out better. And then I added a warp because I wanted this to be used, obviously. And so if I turn it off, okay, it looks clean. If my, I'm trying to tell a story here with like how this kettlebell is working. And if it is used, it's not going to be like the markings aren't going to be so clean like this, right? So I turned on warp, and it just bangs it up a little bit. Like, what if this fell on this front? There's some nicks and scrapes over time, etc. The next thing is paint. So if I go here and I turn on my paint layer, you see, okay, so now I have paint. So the paint is on top of my iron material. The way I did that, I just added a fill layer, made sure metallic was turned off so that Substance would know that this is not a metallic surface. I made sure that the roughness was something reflective, but not like too reflective because it's used, right? So just enough so that you see those white highlights coming in. Yeah. And then I added an HSL perspective, which is a filter that you can use just by right clicking. And what I did was I just changed the saturation a little bit, the lightness. Well, actually just the saturation, just to make it pop a little bit more. And then I added a black mask. Yeah, just so that it can be at the bottom part, not at the top part, right? Because before, you see, without the black mask and without the paint, like this is all iron. And this could be fine too, but with the paint, it clearly marks between, okay, like the handle and the bottom part of the kettlebell, which according to my reference was covered with paint. And then I came in to my roughness because I wanted to make it seem like, okay, some parts of the paint is worn out and other parts are still, kind of shiny. Yeah, and the only thing I did was activated my roughness channel. I gave it some roughness according to what I wanted. I came down, I added a fill layer to my to my fill layer. And let's see here. And I just went for a grunge paint scraped. You can use pretty much anything, but because this is supposed to be painted, right? So I just use paint for this. You can't really see what's going on unless I go to, I'm hitting C. C is the hotkey to switch between channels. Here we are. And now you can see my roughness and see exactly what's going on here. Yeah, and if you don't know about roughness channels, let me know in the comment section. But the black parts are the parts that are obviously darker, and the white parts are the parts that are going to be lighter. I mean, that sounds like common sense, but when it comes to layering materials, it's really important. So if I look at this part right here, you see what happens? It's not really reflective. Let's see, like right here, the white parts. The white parts are going to be the parts that are they're not going to be reflective, and then the black parts are going to be the parts that are reflective. So it was the inverse, my bad. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I did, and then I came in with my level slider. I didn't really play around with that too much, but if I go back to my roughness channel and then I start moving my inputs, right, you can see what happens. So before, my surface was really reflective, different spots, and looked kind of icky, stuff like that. So I like that, and actually, you know what, I could probably do that too. So I changed that a little bit, making sure that the blacks aren't too bright. Move that in a little bit, and it's just art directing at this point. Okay, so that's a little bit more believable and nicer, I guess. And then the next thing, I add another fill layer just to give a color differentiation, or okay, this is a used kettlebell, so some parts of the kettlebell will be different colors because maybe it's exposed to the sun, so it's bleached a little bit, and there's gonna be color change. So again, making sure that this is not metallic because it's a paint. And I just went for a lighter shade of blue as to my base paint. And if I turn this on, you can see. And the main thing that is driving all of this, I didn't paint this in. You can use the paintbrush tool to do it, but I didn't. What I did was, I came in and I added a metal edge wear, which is a generator. And with the generator, you can do a whole bunch of different things. It's a procedural mask that helps give you different effects. If I turned it off, you see, without the generator, it's just I added another coat of paint, and I changed the blending mode. Once I put it on, you can see that it's spreading out all over the surface. If I go to my color channel, you can see what's going on here. Without, just bland, it's just lighter. With it, it's seeming there's been some wear over time. The edges are getting worn out. The initial base paint is getting worn away. Things like that. Alright, so I'm gonna go back, press the hotkey is M to see your material. And I'm going to go into the last part, which is the pilling part, right? So the kettlebell is used, you're dropping it on the floor, stuff like that. Because I'm worrying mostly about telling the story of the object. Every time you want to texture something, you want to think about a story. What it's been through, what environment it's been in, how well it's been treated, etc. So yeah, so my story is a used kettlebell. And so once I turn my paint pilling on, you can see, and this is just a basic layer to say, different parts of the kettlebell. The paint is coming off. Um, it's getting worn down. It's used. It's been through some things. It's been through a lot of drops on the floor, etc. So yeah, and if we take a look at this layer, I only focus on my color. Tried to match like my base iron layer. Turned out my height, my roughness. Make sure that it wasn't a metal because it's supposed to be my paint peeling, right? And so it's supposed to be showing what's underneath. And I can like move it all the way down, and it's just like, okay, maybe it looks like asphalt or something like that. But you can see what happens. You move this height slider, like everything is going in and out. This is what I meant about like procedural. But I'm just gonna, maybe I'll reduce it a little bit. Okay, so you can see the difference. And this is how I had it in general. And I like this one. Less value. And then the other thing was I use another generator. I use a dirt generator. Without it, you can see the difference. It's slight, it's very slight, but it counts, right? Because without it, it's just like, oh, okay. This has like, it's seen like some some gym battles, some wear and tear, right? But with it, you know, there's a little bit of extra like contact, like literally, like if this kettlebell contacted some other surface or something, and then I painted most of it. See, without it, the generator would, let me see, without it, the generator is gonna like blast your object, whatever it is, all over it, according to like the software, and according to the mesh maps that you built, that you baked in. But then you can come in, you can do some painting yourself, and you can use the paintbrush. Like I know people use the paintbrush and just basic paints and colors, like fill layers and paint layers to paint like characters, to paint different like skin tones and things into stuff like that, like faces. You can also paint with like if you're making something, what is it, like stylized or painterly, you know, like not with reflective materials and stuff like that. Then you know, the paint layer is going to be like your best friend, but also it can be corrective. So it gives you more customization, more power and control over, you know, your art direction. So without it, okay, cool, but like the damage is not going to be everywhere, right? Because you don't want to overload the eye. So with it on, you know, it's more tactful and more tasteful. I added a position. If I go through my channels, where is it? Where are we? Here we are. So again, the importance of baking your mesh maps is that you have these maps to use, and they can drive your material creation. So position does exactly what it probably says. You know what it actually says, and it goes based upon the position of your mesh, right, in the map. Without it, you can see, okay, and I maybe have to turn off my paint layer too, but yeah, without the position, the difference again is a little bit more slight, but it's basically making sure that my dirt generator is going to be more focused towards the bottom instead of the top of the handle, right? Because that's what makes sense according to my story. If If I turn it on, you can see. I'm gonna go back to material mode. Without it, and then with it, it's more focused towards the bottom. You're getting more wear and tear towards the bottom. Warp is another filter that's really good, and it just makes sure that like things are getting like more banged up. It's like fine tuning the damage that you did. And again, I just added a sharpen onto everything, just to make the textures pop out a little bit more, like without and with it, right? Without and with it. So yeah, so this is my process. If you have questions, if you want me to go more in depth with texturing and my thought process and everything like that, let me know in the comment section. If not, yeah, this is it. And then you can export like your textures, like I mentioned at the beginning. So if I hit export, let's see here. If I hit export, I can choose all the different places that I want this to go. You can put this on Sketchfab. You do Stager, again Arnold, Blender, Corona. So if you're working in Max, let me see here. Unity, Unreal Engine. Even though it says like Unreal Engine 4, pretty much you're only exporting 3 maps for Unreal Engine, so it can work for Unreal Engine 5 and up, and V-Ray. And yeah, I didn't export textures, but I probably will to take it to my render engine of choice. But yeah, this is just a brief overview of what I went through and what I was thinking about to texture this asset. Next video, next prompt, I will probably do a time lapse of texturing from scratch, so you'll see my process. If you want to do that, just let me know. And yeah, thanks for watching.